Well, here's a little knife we're working on. It's kind of a cowboy knife. I've heard people call it bull cutter, nut cutter. I don't know. There's all kinds of names for it. It's a knife that you'd use around cattle, close quarters, very blunt tip there, so it's safe. Problem with this one was it got dropped on a hard surface and it cracked that scale material. Now it's got a really rough edge there. It's not any fun to use. And I encourage the owner to go look up the guy. It's got his name on there, the guy that made this, and see if he would repair it. But he didn't buy it directly from the guy. I think he felt kind of funny about reaching out to him, so we'll fix it up. Here's a little knife making vise that I made a while back. I've got a video on my channel about it, and I use it a lot. But today, we're also going to try out another vise made by a YouTuber, Green Ridge Metalworks. This is a prototype. I'm doing a little testing on it for him, and it's a infinitely adjustable knife maker vise. He's trying to finalize his design. Maybe give him a follow, and who knows, maybe he'll have this on the market for long. So far, it's pretty sweet. I was kind of trying to figure out what that material was that the scales were made out of, but it's pretty brittle. I'm not having any trouble breaking off pieces of it. Some kind of plastic or acrylic, I don't know what that is. Instead of using brute force to remove those scales, let's try heat. Most of your epoxies will start to let go around 250 degrees or so. This won't affect the temper. As long as you stay below 375, 350, most carbon steel's tempering range is outside of that, but be safe. Go about 250. It'll probably loosen up. All right, we've been in there for a while. It should be up to temp. Kind of depends on how well the thing is peened. Let's start on that bad side. Woo, that thing's hot. It's not hot on the cotton, but I got a hole in my glove. Let's see, the guy didn't peen the pins particularly. Came out pretty easy. Or maybe a little. Well, it wasn't too hard. Now, one reason not to get carried away and just beat these scales off is now you have a nice pattern we can go back with. And this wasn't one piece. After it cooled off, I was just curious how tough the stuff was, and I kind of went to flex it, and it just snapped right there. Not to criticize the guy that made this knife, but if this was your own knife, if it came back to you, this is a good chance to kind of really look at it and say, hey, is my epoxy system I'm using working? Is there a good seal? Is there any corrosion in there? Am I using enough glue? Not enough? Again, not to criticize this guy, but pretty thin on the glue. There appears to be no glue up here at the front. And the insides of these scales are very slick. These really should be scuffed up with some 36 grit or something to give it a little bite. Now, I think you should even scuff underneath these scales on the steel. This looks like it's all been, mirror polished even under the scales. A mirror polish, very light glue, and a very slick, shiny scale material is not a good combination. Just my 2 cents. One thing you might mention when you're taking on a repair like this is you might tell the old boy that, hey, there ain't no guarantees. This thing may get broke or destroyed. Okay, I sent my customer a bunch of pictures of scale material. He liked this one. Bought this from Jant's Knife Supply at the Arkansas Knife Show a couple years ago. This is a bone, and it's probably like down at the end of a joint, and it's a crosscut view, so you can see the sponginess in the bone joint there. And then it's got a Limelight with a little bluish purple color there. Show you a trick I learned from Nick Wheeler. If you're a knife maker and you haven't discovered Nick Wheeler's videos yet, you're missing out. He's got a lot of good tips. Now, since this is a book match set of scales, and the customer wants a little of both showing, this little window is your preview as to what you're going to end up with. Now, do you want more Alumilite? Do you want more bone showing? Just let you preview the different possibilities you have in that scale. See, that doesn't look right to me. Got some of this bone coming in over here. I kind of think I like the looks of that bone on the back where it gets a lot of bone showing up front. Maybe have that lanyard kind of centered right there. Now, even though these new scales they appear to be pretty flat, there's no wobble. I'm gonna hit them on a surface plate anyway, just to be sure. Some 150 grit adhesive paper, which I highly recommend. If you guys haven't been using this, you should get some. Except it's about 30 degrees in my shop. Nothing's wanting to be very sticky today. That's going to be my outside of the book match. Don't you love that bone smell? Very flat. I kind of thought it was, but you know, before I get too far into this, I always give them a hit on this stone. See, now this one shows there's a little low spot right there and right there. I can feel it. I didn't even notice that before, so good thing I checked it. So I got even scratch marks all the way across there. Now I want to attach these scales together so I can at least get my drilling started, maybe even some of the shaping. I'm not a big fan of putting super glue right on the scales. I've seen some guys do that and then knock them apart later, but you know, you can accomplish the same thing with some decent quality painter's tape and super glue. Yeah. I just put 3 or 4 drops down the middle like that. Make sure they're exactly where I want them. We'll hold it for a few seconds and let it bond, but once it cures, those are locked together pretty good, but you can still easily break them apart because it's not any stronger than that tape. So they're already stuck. Pretty handy little tip. I'm kind of a believer in no surprises, so back here in the waist, I'm going to drill a couple of test holes just to see how this material drills. See, here's what I was wondering about. There's some pretty good chip out when the bit comes through. It's the kind of things I like to know in advance. May need to run my drill a little faster. Oh yeah, I sped my drill bit up by quite a bit. Much cleaner. That's the lanyard hole. Now there is one potential problem with working on a already made blade. It's already been sharpened. And I'm sure you've seen the helicopter accidents where someone spins a knife around, cuts herself. More than likely though, you're going to have to chase these holes out to get the epoxy and stuff out. So let me show you how I deal with that. Got a piece of aluminum bar there, kind of a scrap piece of metal. And you see the guys drill this thing a catch and go spinning around and crazy. Well, this already has a slot in there, and I figured out a while back that I can drop a pair of pliers in there. Makes it safe. Just like that. 1/8" pin stock. That's what the guy used the first time. He used brass, which I have some brass pin stock, but I don't have any of this brass tubing, so I'm going to go back with stainless steel pins and tube this time. Now my two pieces of scale material are pinned in two places. They can't move. And if we need to, now we can take them apart and go back and we won't lose our reference. I think I'm going to trim off some of this excess on the bandsaw though. Oh, that didn't go well. Plan B. Well, we'll try my little metal bandsaw. I don't have another blade for that other one. I went ahead and drilled the rest of the holes for the pins, but I think that's about as far as I'm going to go with the scales attached to each other. We'll have to finish the front with them together, but I'd rather be able to look at them on the knife a little bit before we get that far, so I'll go ahead and get them popped apart. Let's hope my super glue tip doesn't embarrass me on camera. Just like that. Pull the tape off, all the super glue's in the tape. Back to two perfectly flat scales. I think it's been a few years ago, but on the Knife Dogs forum, Tracy Mickley had done some testing on epoxies, and I think he said one of the ways the epoxy manufacturers test the adhesion is they use a sandblasted surface. And I do that a lot on my knives too. I've heard a lot of guys recommend it, so let's get this one cleaned up. We've got a very coarse sandblasted finish on there. I've got a coarse crosshatched pattern of sanding marks on the inside of my scales. But before we start mixing up epoxy, I want to give everything a good clean. I use acetone and denatured alcohol kind of back and forth. I wasn't real sure what acetone would do to the illuminolite. I didn't want to take a chance on messing it up. So we're going to use the alcohol this time. I use G-Flex by West Systems. I've had really good luck with that epoxy. This G-Flex is kind of a slow cure. Stay away from that 5-minute epoxy. With 6 pins and a lanyard tube, that would be a chore to get all put together in 5 minutes. Don't think I want to try that. I get epoxy on all my pins. And we'll put her to bed for the night. Shows you how crazy this weather is. It was in the teens, highs below freezing just last weekend. 70 degrees today. Crazy. Next morning, I can tell from our mixing area that the epoxy fully cured. Since it's kind of chilly in my shop, just to be on the safe side, I actually put this light down it with an incandescent bulb over it to keep it warm during the night. We're good though. Back to the painter's tape. You can tell I like using that. Boy, stuck in there pretty good. A lot of grinder work up next, so I'm going to protect this blade. I don't want any accidental bumps with the belt. That's about as far as I'm willing to go in the grinder. We'll switch to some hand finishing. It's one of the things I like about this vise. You can work on it and rotate it without having to loosen anything. Back to the adhesive sandpaper. I like doing my handles with a flat sanding block. Even though it's got some curves and radiuses, this really levels things out, and it keeps you from having your pins be raised. Now when I'm doing handles, I always focus on getting the flat symmetrical. You know, they got a little, there's a roundness to them. I don't touch these hard corners till I'm happy with the flats. Now I'll do a little radius on these corners and blend those in. I suppose a lot of guys do this on the grinder, but I like the visual you get from that clean file line there. You get your initial 45, and you can see exactly that everything is symmetrical. And then you can go back and blend it in. I don't know if the camera's going to focus that close in, but you see the way the light catches, there's a nice 45 there. That's what I'm looking for when I'm filing in that initial break. And you can see that it's very even. All your sides match. Now I'll go back in and blend that in with some sandpaper. I've worked my way up through the grits. I'm up to 1,000. Using a little water now. I use a hard backer on the lower grits so that my pins will stay flush. Then I switch to this little piece of rubber for kind of the medium grits, which again gives it a firmness. On these last couple grits, the 1,000, the 2,000 grit, we're kind of into the polishing territory now. I'm just going to do it with my fingers. Just remember, this is probably one of the most dangerous tools in your shop. Well, thanks for following along on this little rehandle job. Pretty sweet little knife. You know, if you're just getting into knife making, doing some repairs and rehandling is a way a lot of guys get started. You know, if you may not be set up to do heat treating and all the metal work just yet, but you can start off with some handle work. And you know, they even sell blanks you can put handles on. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. Thanks for following along. See you on the next one.